Welcome to the deep dive, and hit subscribe right now if you haven't already, because today we're going somewhere highly controversial.
Oh, yeah.
We are bringing you an exclusive look at a really provocative new ebook that is just making massive waves across the internet. It's called Never Argue with the Woman: Withdraw Attention, Affection, and Commitment by Conrad Riker.
Right.
And if you've ever wanted to truly understand the raw, unfiltered worldview driving the modern men's rights and, the red-pilled manosphere movements, this is the
It
text.
absolutely is.
It's an ultra-long, incisive, and honestly fascinating read that attempts to explain the history of our institutions before, as the author describes it, they were captured by feminists and Marxists.
That's a huge part of his premise, yeah.
Yeah. And if you want to read the raw material we are analyzing today, it's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Plus, you can follow the author's ongoing analysis on Substack at Conrad Riker.
And I highly recommend checking the source material if you want the full context, because it is a text that pulls absolutely no punches.
None.
It requires us to look at some intensely debated topics. The central premise we'll be exploring today is his fundamental belief that modern institutions, from the family courts to the corporate boardroom, have been entirely captured to work against men.
Against men specifically.
Right. And in this current landscape, the book argues male survival requires a strategy of complete, calculated withdrawal.
Which is wild. So today we're unpacking the core strategies, the evolutionary biology claims, and the really extreme legal tactics presented in Riker's book. But before we dive into the how and why of his arguments, let's just pause and set some ground rules.
Very necessary here.
Okay, let's unpack this. This source material contains highly charged, deeply polarizing social and political commentary. We want to make it crystal clear to you, the listener, that neither of us here is taking sides.
No, not at all.
We aren't validating or endorsing the author's viewpoints. We are strictly acting as your impartial guides.
Exactly. Our goal is just to report and analyze the ideas, claims, and the specific worldview contained in this text so you can understand the mechanics of this movement.
Right, we are here to understand what the book says, not to tell you what to think about it.
Well said. So, the baseline assumption driving the entire book is that society currently operates as a gynocracy.
A gynocracy.
Right. Riker defines this as a systemic structure governed by and for women, functioning at the direct and deliberate expense of men.
And he doesn't just mean like a subtle cultural shift, right?
No. He frames it as a hard institutional reality.
Yeah, he hits the ground running with this concept he calls the marriage plantation.
That's a heavy term.
Very. Riker argues that modern family law has effectively transformed marriage into a state-enforced labor camp for men. And to build this case, he doesn't just rely on theory, he uses some incredibly stark anecdotes.
The stories are pretty brutal.
Yeah, like let's look at Mike. According to the text, Mike is an Ohio veteran who came back from Afghanistan with a severe shrapnel injury. The book states that when Mike's wife filed for divorce, the court awarded her the house, primary custody of their children, and this is the crazy part, an astonishing 60% of his VA disability check.
60%.
Yeah. Mike now reportedly sleeps in his Ford Ranger.
And the author uses that to illustrate the lower end of the economic spectrum, but he also points to the very top.
Oh, the tech CEO guy.
John, yeah.
Uh-huh.
He details the story of John, a tech CEO who built a massive software company from the ground up. Following his divorce, John ended up living in a tiny studio apartment, eating ramen noodles, while paying his ex-wife $40,000 a month in alimony.
40 grand a month.
Yeah, and the text specifically notes she uses that money to, and I quote, hang out at vegan cafes.
Wow.
Through these narratives, Riker claims that husbands are no longer treated as partners under the law, but rather as human ATMs.
And he backs up these stories with statistical claims that form the foundation of his whole argument. He cites CDC data indicating that women initiate 70 to 80% of all divorces in the United States. And then he pairs that with data from the National Parents Organization, which he claims shows that mothers win physical custody in 80 to 90% of cases.
The analytical leap Riker makes here is crucial to understanding his worldview. He posits that the legal system operates with a default setting that basically views women as victims and men as wallets.
Just default presumption.
Exactly. Because of those statistics, he argues the system essentially incentivizes women to break marriage contracts, as they are statistically guaranteed to profit from the dissolution while facing minimal financial risk.
It's a really bleak picture of the courtroom. But the book argues this disparity extends into the workplace too, focusing heavily on what Riker calls male disposability.
Male disposability.
Yeah, he contrasts the mainstream narratives about the wage gap with these brutal workplace fatality statistics.
Right, the BLS numbers.
Exactly. Citing the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the text states that 93% of all workplace fatalities are men.
93%.
Yeah. And Riker asks a pretty pointed question. Where is the societal outrage for the men who died doing the most dangerous essential jobs on the planet?
Right.
He's talking about roofing, mining, Alaskan crab fishing, maintaining high voltage power lines. His thesis is that society demands men take on equal or greater peril to keep civilization running, but completely ignores their sacrifices when discussing gender equality.
What's fascinating here is how he connects this concept of male disposability to the legal and educational systems, specifically targeting what he terms the accusation industry.
The accusation industry.
Yes, Riker takes direct aim at Title IX campus tribunals
Yeah.
and the broader handling of false accusations. The text repeatedly references the tragic case of Brian Banks to anchor this point.
The case is just heartbreaking to read about.
It really is. Banks was a high school football phenom, verbally committed to play at USC, and his entire future was just vaporized when he spent 5 years in prison due to a rape accusation
An accusation that
that his accuser later admitted on tape was entirely fabricated.
the book uses it to highlight how quickly a man's life can be dismantled without a single shred of physical evidence.
It serves as a devastating anchor point for his argument. Riker pairs the Banks case with data he attributes to the FBI and the UK Home Office, claiming that 8% of rape allegations are provably false.
Okay.
He notes this rate is significantly higher than false reports for other types of crimes. The broader claim he's making is that due process has been effectively eradicated in favor of believe all women dogmas, leaving men entirely defenseless against state-sanctioned character assassination.
So we have this massive systemic grievance laid out, but the book doesn't just complain about the system, it tries to explain the underlying why of female behavior that drives it.
The biological imperative.
Right. To do this, the author leans incredibly hard into evolutionary biology. He cites the work of Dr. David Buss, a prominent evolutionary psychologist, to argue that women are biologically hardwired for hypergamy.
Meaning they naturally date up.
Exactly, that they are instinctively driven to seek out mates with higher status, better genetics, and more resources.
And Riker points to modern dating apps as the ultimate proof of this biological imperative just running wild.
The Tinder data.
Right. He claims that Tinder data shows 80% of women are exclusively competing for the top 10 to 20% of men.
Which is a crazy ratio.
According to the book, average guys are essentially digitally culled from the mating pool, while a tiny fraction of highly desirable men hoard all the attention. It's the Pareto principle applied directly to romance.
This biological perspective feeds directly into a concept Riker calls the vulnerability trap, or Schrodinger's masculinity.
Yes.
Wait, like Schrodinger's cat in the box? How does quantum physics apply to dating?
It's actually a very apt analogy for his argument. Just like the cat exists in a superposition of being both alive and dead until observed, the book argues that a man's status is in a superposition. Society relentlessly tells men they must open up, cry, and be emotionally vulnerable. But the moment a man actually opens the box and shows that vulnerability, the text claims his biological value to a partner drops dead.
The author says it's like ordering a steak and then screaming when it bleeds.
A very vivid way to put it.
Yeah.
Riker claims that female biology actively punishes men who show weakness, regardless of what they might say they want.
Right.
He cites a Journal of Social Psychology study tracking couples, asserting that men who expressed emotional insecurity faced a 23% higher abandonment rate.
23%.
Yeah. The text argues that women demand vulnerability to ensure compliance and gauge emotional investment, but their evolutionary wiring immediately loses respect for a man who complies.
And Riker claims this biological suppression doesn't just happen to adult men. It starts when boys are barely out of kindergarten.
In the schools.
Exactly. He spends a significant portion of the book arguing the education system actively pathologizes natural male energy. According to the text, boys who are just acting like normal, rambunctious boys are drugged into submission with ADHD medications.
He brings up data from Australia and the US claiming boys are punished, suspended, or expelled at vastly higher rates than girls for the exact same behavior.
You're just acting out.
Right. Furthermore, he notes Harvard research claiming boys get marked 15% harsher for identical schoolwork. The underlying argument is that Institutional learning environments are optimized for female behavior sitting still, agreeable compliance, while actively penalizing male restlessness and competitiveness.
This systemic suppression of male energy culminates in what Riker has termed gynocratic inflation. This is one of the more original theories presented in the book.
It is a unique take.
He argues that because women control roughly 85% of consumer spending in the economy, corporate America and the media actively castrate male purpose to cater to that demographic.
Following the money.
You follow the money, and the result is a cultural landscape where advertisements mock masculinity to sell products. Media tropes constantly depict fathers as bumbling, incompetent idiots.
Right, think of the classic sitcom dad who can't operate a washing machine.
Exactly, while mothers are always portrayed as the competent, eye-rolling problem solvers.
What Riker is essentially doing here is tracing the economic incentives that shape our culture. If the system is this rigged, as he perceives it, the logical next step is how to navigate it.
How to survive it.
Right. The book makes it abundantly clear that arguing, debating, or trying to logically persuade a partner is a trap that will just get a man destroyed.
Which brings us to the core of the book's title. Never argue with a woman. How does Riker tell his readers to fight back?
Complete withdrawal.
Yeah, the central tactic is absolute strategic withdrawal. He calls it the AAA withdrawal. When a man faces disrespect, emotional manipulation, or what the manosphere often calls shit tests, the man must completely withdraw his attention, his affection, and his commitment. The text advises treating these three things as highly valuable currency that should never be given away to someone who doesn't respect the source.
It is about reclaiming agency by controlling the only variables a man actually owns. Riker argues that in a gynocentric system, a man's attention is his most exploited resource.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because he backs this up with some intense psychological warfare tactics. He is essentially taking cold corporate behavioral economics and applying them directly to human romance.
It's very calculated.
Yeah. Riker references Sheena Iyengar's famous jam study, the one where a supermarket offered 24 types of jam on one day and only 6 types on another. The result was that having fewer options actually made people buy more. Riker applies that scarcity principle to male attention.
By artificially restricting the supply of attention, you spike its perceived value. Riker details a 30-day radio silence protocol for men dealing with difficult partners.
30 days of nothing.
Nothing. By ignoring texts, cutting off communication, and becoming completely unavailable, Riker claims you trigger a biological panic in the female brain.
Wow.
He argues this sudden scarcity spikes a woman's cortisol and dopamine levels, forcing her to obsess over the silence, question her own behavior, and ultimately reevaluate the man's worth.
It's behavioral conditioning, plain and simple. And he pairs this psychological withdrawal with what he calls contempt conversion.
Contempt conversion.
Yeah. When a woman displays contempt or tries to shame a man, the author instructs the man to use that negative energy as fuel. Don't argue. Go lift heavy weights.
Or is it physical?
Riker advocates for a philosophy of biodominance. He tells his readers to adopt a carnivore diet to naturally spike testosterone levels and to utilize military techniques like the Navy SEALs box breathing.
The 4-4 method.
Right. That's the 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale technique used to lower the heart rate in combat. The goal is to maintain an unshakable, stoic frame during any domestic conflict, projecting such raw physical authority that arguments simply evaporate.
The physical dominance is only half the equation, though. The book stresses that physical stoicism is absolutely useless if a man is legally and financially vulnerable.
Which makes sense.
Right. Riker goes deep into what he calls legal guerrilla tactics. The objective is to avoid becoming the next John, paying massive alimony while living in a studio apartment. To do this, he advocates for a financial vasectomy.
He also calls this the seahorse strategy, right? Referencing how male seahorses carry the babies, ensuring there's no paternity fraud or alimony. It's about total financial stealth.
Precisely. The asset protection mechanisms he outlines are highly specific, aggressively defensive, and designed to make a man entirely state-proof.
State-proof.
Riker advises his readers to move their liquid wealth into offshore Cayman Island trusts, to utilize Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, cold wallets that domestic family courts cannot easily track or seize, and to set up anonymous LLCs to hold property.
That is intense.
And above all, he preaches an absolute unbreakable rule against cohabitation. The text warns that allowing a partner to move in or leaving a toothbrush at their place too often is the first step toward common law marriage laws allowing the state to declare your property as a marital asset.
So the author's solution to modern dating is essentially to treat a Tinder match with the same operational security as a CIA black site.
It is an extreme level of risk management, yes. And if a man is worried about false allegations, which Riker's analysis of the Brian Banks case suggests every man should be, he outlines a defensive protocol called the 3Ds: document, delay, disengage.
The book actually tells men to install nanny cams in their own homes to monitor their own living spaces.
Right, to protect themselves.
It advises recording all conversations if they sense a relationship turning volatile, and to only communicate with unpredictable partners through encrypted apps like Signal or exclusively through their lawyers. He literally tells men to treat their cell phones like an evidence locker.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Riker's ultimate goal isn't merely for men to hide in the shadows, clinging to their crypto wallets.
All right, there's an end game.
The culmination of his strategy, the true endgame of this withdrawal, is what he calls the focus fortress. He is urging men to completely divest their time, money, and emotional energy from a society that he believes hates them.
And put it where?
Instead, they should reinvest that energy into building parallel, male-centric networks.
He highlights examples like male-only co-working spaces, underground professional support systems, and groups like the Veterans Brotherhood.
Exactly.
These are spaces where men bond over shared struggle and responsibility, like fixing trucks in the wilderness or building businesses, rather than engaging in what Riker views as the mainstream feminized culture of sharing feelings and victimhood.
It is a blueprint for societal secession, a roadmap for men to build a parallel economy and culture that operates entirely outside the purview of the institutions they believe are corrupted.
So what does this all mean for you? Whether you completely agree with Riker's militant, red-pilled worldview, or you fundamentally disagree with the baseline assumptions he's making, this text provides a stark, uncompromising look into a very real phenomenon.
It really does.
It is an exploration of the absolute disillusionment felt by a rapidly growing demographic of men. These are men who feel completely alienated, extracted from, and discarded by modern legal, educational, and social systems. It is a raw look at a movement of men who are actively choosing to walk away.
And that leads to a final, truly chilling concept from Chapter 21 of the source material that we haven't fully unpacked yet, but it's vital for understanding where this movement might be heading.
Oh, the biology stuff.
Right. Riker briefly touches on the future of biological supremacy and CRISPR gene editing technology.
Which sounds like science fiction.
It does. But he poses a deeply provocative scenario. If this movement of men fully decides to go their own way, what happens when technology catches up to their ideology?
Wow.
If they begin utilizing advanced gene editing, artificial wombs, and offshore surrogate DNA banking to completely bypass women and the state in the realm of reproduction? What does that mean for the fundamental future of human evolution and society?
It's heavy.
It is a scenario that completely upends our understanding of biology, ethics, and the social contract.
It's a wild thought to end on, and something for you to seriously mull over as technology advances. That brings us to the end of today's deep dive into the mechanics of this movement. I want to remind you once again to please hit that like button and subscribe to the show.
Definitely do that.
If this deep dive fascinated you and you want to read the raw material for yourself to see exactly how these arguments are constructed, you really need to check Amazon Kindle and Google Playbooks to buy Conrad Riker's ebook, Never Argue with a Woman.
Highly recommend checking it out.
And to keep up with his latest unfiltered analysis, make sure to follow him at Conrad Riker on Substack. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.